Dying Light 2 is going to be a massive flop just like Cyberpunk was, or even bigger. This is a comment that I keep seeing brought up in not only my comment section, but other people's comment sections in Discord servers and over on Reddit as well, and that ultimately inspired today's video. Let's tackle the idea of what if Dying Light 2 actually succeeds on everything Techland is promising. But I think it's very important to get this out at the start of the video. Let's be civil. Open, honest conversation between everyone here is the best thing, because at the end of the day, what matters most is we get the product that was expected. Right? Consumers are happy because they get a playable game. I mean, sure, nowadays, day one patches are pretty much the norm, but the point is you don't have to wait months after release for the game to get to a point that it should have been at launch. We all want to get what was promised to us, keep our expectations in order, and of course the developers want to be able to sell the game and make the community happy. It's a win-win for everyone across the board. So it's okay to be cautious, it's okay to be confident in your pre-orders if you decided to go that route, and have faith in the developers. Personally, I see both sides of the argument. I just want to clarify, I've never encouraged pre-orders for anything, even for this game. I'm not really someone that encourages pre-orders. Do your research is really all I can say. If you like what you see, you have enough confidence in the developers, by all means, pull the trigger. But at the end of the day, that's money you're putting on the line for a game that you don't even know is gonna be a finished product. It's kind of a gamble that we're taking now. That just seems to be the way the industry is now. Whether if it's true or not, that's just how it feels. But when it comes to the topic of Dying Light, the sequel seems to be blowing its predecessor out of the water in damn near every conceivable way, and in this industry we've really been trained to universally agree that if something sounds too good to be true, ultimately it is. And in this last week alone, from content at launch, Techland has announced Dying Light 2 will have around 500 hours for completionists with multiple endings and different experiences just based off the player choices alone. And they've also said post-launch content, probably both paid and free, will be coming to Dying Light 2 for the next 5 years. And that's just what we've heard in the last week. We also know they're doubling down on what made the original game so unique, while improving everything that wasn't enjoyable or fun in the first game. Just based off of what I've seen and heard, this game looks like it's exactly what a development team can come up with if they're passionate enough and willing to push the envelope. Not just settling to make their fan base happy, but to wow and create something like nothing else before. Not only setting new standards for sequels in general, but for themselves and this IP that they're really starting to hone in on. Prior to the announcement of the sequel, when you thought of the original game, things like story, world events, or world building, or anything dynamic that has a real impact to the story or Crane's development as a character throughout that game's story are never brought up, or straight up don't even exist. More often than not, when you think of the original game, things like parkour or having an electric machete or finally being able to vault a zombie and dropkick another zombie are things that probably popped up in your mind. Parkour and viscerally brutal combat are a massive part of Dying Light's DNA, and I've said it before, Techland could have very easily put out a game back in 2019 with a story that at the very least was serviceable, doubled down on parkour moves, parkour animations, given us new blueprints and more incredibly satisfying ways to cripple, maim, and decapitate the undead, and called it a day. And you know what? Plenty of people would have been more than happy to buy that game, myself included, and we probably would have never thought twice about what could have been. Because Dying Light is such a unique experience in of itself with many different elements of both defined genres like survival, horror, first-person perspective, and even those that are a little bit more on the unique side, like having parkour in its game as a primary means of traversal, a dynamic day-night cycle that has a real impact on player experience continuously. You know, none of it is scripted, but organic, fully naturally integrated with their exploration into the darkness, adding a world of possibilities just based off the individual players and how they handle certain situations. Since this game is a mashup of different concepts, the sequel also added in the idea of it being an RPG as well. Regardless of what type of genre or game a dev team is coming up with, there's plenty of things it can take from Dying Light 2. One of the biggest components, believe it or not, I think is this game's music. Music in general is a massively important part of even creating a proper mood and tone. Some soundtracks in video games are now as iconic and instantly recognizable as movie soundtracks or even movie quotes. And while the sounds of the music pushing you forward to want to do more parkour moves and keep that combo meter flowing so that way you'll hear more strings and complexity to the music, it's also very nuanced. The composer over the last week or so has been sharing details on Twitter on how the music is, from encouraging you to want to chain more parkour moves as previously stated, to music changing based off enemies you're fighting, and say a big infected comes into the fray, the music changes to the deadliest foe you're now encountering. Music slowly fades out while you're in buildings to it ultimately completely dying out if you're in there too long. While you're running on rooftops, if you drop down and hit the ground, there's no music on the floor to enhance that feel feeling of dread and death on the ground, and at night you're gonna hear absolutely no music, so you can hear the screams and moans of the infected in pain. The only other game that seems to come close to music like this is the Doom games. The soundtrack is front and center, driving the player forward, which made me think a lot of the push forward philosophy both the Doom games and Dying Light 2 seems to be embracing. At least Dying Light 2 is embracing it in terms of the parkour system, but it's very particular in what you hear, when you hear it, and why you're hearing it. If all else fails, this is something that's quite incredible, and devs can try to implement a dynamic soundtrack as nuanced as this, so they can give their projects their own unique sound and feel. Or even the concept of having days and nights drastically change how a game feels and plays. I genuinely believe in the future we'll see more blending of the genres moving forward in this industry, and we'll start seeing some really unique concepts you never thought of meshing together, creating some of the most rewarding and unique experiences a game can offer. You can also argue Techland is giving players the ability to really alleviate the boredom here, based around players' creativity. Let me explain this. If you're new to the channel, from 2020 well through 2021, I was kept preoccupied with Doom Eternal. Arguably, it's a very linear game. Demon spawns are the same each and every single time. The amount of enemies there are never change, the environments never really change. You're playing the same levels over and over again. And I'm someone who gets bored incredibly quickly. You know what kept someone like me busy? The ability to create and tackle fights differently every single time. Now, I don't want to go too in depth here because talking Eternal and its mechanics can be a bit of a rabbit hole, but the systems id Software put in place, while easy to learn, was a challenge to really master. They designed it where each demon had a weapon, or commonly referred to as a tool, to eliminate that demon as quickly as possible, but over time you learn what's obvious or the immediate go-to isn't exactly the only way to tackle that demon. And even sometimes something a little bit more complex was not only way more efficient, but much more flashy in execution. To this day, the game's damn near almost 2 years old, people are still coming up with techniques on how to fight certain demons, how to get rid of them as quickly as possible. In a linear game, you just see tons of clips of people showing off and being as flashy as possible, and Techland announced they want to do the exact same thing with the parkour system, that it's easy to learn, a little bit more difficult to master, yet those that are willing to put in the time and effort can come up with some really mesmerizing combos, and that's not even incorporating combat into it. We're talking strictly traversal here. Redefining what a great sequel is, showing Dying Light as a solid IP that's more than just an open world zombie game, and Techland is one of the more competent and passionate studios out there that, despite the odds of the game getting delayed multiple times, having a full year of no updates after a delay that seemed out of the blue, and suffering sexual misconduct allegations, if this game is everything it's setting out to be, it'll be one hell of a success story for the devs and the community alike. But of course, that's just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. You know, how do you feel as we get closer and closer to this release date that some of us felt would never come? What do you think about this game? What are you most excited for? Personally, I just want to see how much deeper this game really is than what Techland is sharing and letting on. And, you know, I just wanted to kind of touch on those comments of that this is going to be the next Cyberpunk and Techland is like the next CD Projekt Red. Just because they're two dev teams that you know of that are from the same country doesn't mean they're going to fall to the same problems and issues. I mean, Techland has been pretty transparent, and if I remember correctly, CD Projekt Red never actually shared any gameplay, at least not to the extent where Techland did. Techland allowed content creators and journalists to get their hands on a build and get genuine feedback from them, whereas with CD Projekt Red, everything we seen was really scripted and really strict, and they never showed last-gen gameplay. I mean, even though Techland arguably is dragging their feet a little bit, we are getting some more console comparisons sometime during this month before launch. That's still, again, more than CD Projekt Red did. I don't know, it's kind of a stupid argument either way. It makes sense to have your guard up naturally, but just to dismiss the game and think it's gonna be a mess just because the devs are from the same country is fucking stupid. And mind you, I'm still holding up the possibility it could flop, and I'm not saying it's gonna be perfect. I was just speaking. In a perfect world in this video, if they did deliver on everything, that's what I'd imagine would happen. But feel free to correct me in the comments section. I'll be down there chatting with you guys like always, but thank you all so much for watching. And remember, be friendly, be civil. We're all consumers. We're all on the same page here. Until next time, I'll see you all later.